Hey everyone, welcome back. Glad to have you as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be walking you through the installation of a Transgo HD2 shift kit into a 4L65E. So if you're looking for like an out-of-the-box solution as far as shift kits, in my humble opinion, the 4L60E's HD2 kit is the best shift kit for this transmission. So 4L60, 65, 70, whichever variant, whichever year you're working with, it'll allow you to customize the transmission and set it up mechanically, tune it from a shift calibration perspective to pretty much any conceivable application, from waking up a daily driver to supporting a high performance street strip type deal. So if you're just looking for something that is very straightforward, easy to install, and at the same time comes with a load of tech support, in my opinion, probably the best tech support available when it comes to shift kits in in terms of what Transgo provides, this is going to be the route to take. So we have everything here on the bench, so I'm going to walk through all the different parts and then we'll get started. This shift kit has components that are going to install into the forward drum, the pump, the valve body, the servo, and the two accumulators, the 1-2 and the 3-4. So with the pump assembly, we're also going to augment this kit with Transgo's unbreakable pump rings. Those are a great low buck mod or upgrade that you can install that will prevent ring breakup, which failure of the pump rings is one of the more common stimuli, if you will, that leads to total pump failure. So when the rings fail or break up, then obviously everything else goes with it. So these will kind of help in a high performance or really heavy duty application beef up that part of the pump assembly. All right, so this kit came out of that 4L60E that was featured in my 4L60E high performance part 6 and part 7 videos, and we're basically taking it in its entirety, everything that did come out of it, and transferring it to the 4L65. So as far as all the parts, as how they're laid out, we'll have everything that is factory to the left, and then we'll have the Transgo equivalents where applicable to the right. All right, so here's the unbreakable pump ring kit. This is the factory slide spring along with the Transgo spring. And then for the pump cover, you have your torque converter clutch control valve. Nothing in the kit applies or installs into that valve train. You just leave it factory. For the boost valve, you have the factory boost valve and the buffer and pressure regulator spring. And then you have the Transgo counterparts. So Transgo provides its own boost valve along with a little spacer for the stem, its own bumper and pressure regulator spring, and then of course you reuse your pressure regulator valve. Transgo also provides an updated or new snap ring. So here's the high rate return spring kit. Again, if you watch that video, particularly the part 7, the teardown inspection of that 4L60E, there was no high rate return springs installed, and I talk about why that could be in that video. But we're going to install them here into the forward and 3-4 assembly, and that will give a nice crisp 3-2 downshift, and at the same time will further help centrifugal apply prevention at high RPMs. So of course we have our piston housing and 3-4 ply ring along with brand new set of bonded pistons. So those will go into the forward drum. We also have our clutch packs, we have our sprag, and with the sun gears, I always like to cut little slits or channels here in the face that goes into the planetary so that we can increase lube flow to the captured bearing as well as the pinion gears. So I've done that with the the front sun gear and the rear sun gear. It's not necessary on factory applications, but anything high performance, I always do it. As far as the pump's concerned, both pump cover and pump body have been machined. I gotta stick a new bushing and a seal there. We're going to be installing Sonic's pump body bushing in the pump body, and then for the stator and the rear, we're going to install the Sonic's upgraded rear stator bushing. I like these over the factory because they tend to wear out less, and they provide for a little bit more sealing integrity than the factory replacement style bushings. And then this is just the front stator bushing. Front stator bushing is going to also be taller than stock. As you can see, the stock bushing here it doesn't completely fill the bore there in the location of the bushing, whereas the updated bushing does. And the updated bushing comes in all of the bushing kits. And one other thing I forgot to mention before we move on, and I'll show it when I do it, but you want to drill out the drain back. So this is going to be your drain back here. Once I pop this seal out, you'll see a drain back port. You want to drill that to 5/16. And that's for anything high performance. For stock or even mild builds, it's not super critical. You know, you can do it or you can leave it as is. But for anything high RPM, high performance, you want to always do that. And that'll prevent fluid from pooling in behind that front pump seal and blowing it out. Okay, so a lot of the kit addresses valves in the valve body. So you're swapping a lot of different parts, you know, from the factory with Transgo parts. So starting here on the left, this is going to be the PWM side of the valve body. We have the 3-2 control solenoid. It comes with, the kit comes with a new spring for the 3-2 control valve. So you want to install that. And then for the 3-2 downshift valve, it comes with a kind of purplish spring that's designed to fully compress and bind so that this valve doesn't move. And what they're doing is they're having you block off the 3-2 downshift valve to eliminate one routing circuit for 3-2 fluid where it could potentially leak. And it also will crispen up the shift a little bit, all things equal. So nothing for the reverse abuse valve. And as far as blocking this, you can do this you know, with or without the shift kit. So the methodology is to block both this valve and the 3-2 control valve inboard so that neither of them move. So it addresses two potential areas for cross leaks and basically eliminates them. You know, eliminates that risk from it happening. This is going to be your 3-4 upshift valve. It's going to be your 3-4 relay and your 4-3 sequence. Make sure that the large spools here go inward. If they're not, if you know, if it's facing this way, then you're not going to have any 3-4 upshift. For the TCC, it's going to replace the entire valve train with Transgo's own TCC regulator valve and spring. And if, you know, we're going to test this valve body on the Sonex vac test machine. If for whatever reason this circuit here is still not holding enough vacuum, and my standard is 15 inches of lift for stock and mild performance, and I like to see 20 for high performance, then what we'll do is we'll install a fits-all valve in this location that has O-rings, and that works with the factory inboard valve, blocking it from any movement, and that will permanently fix that bore. And if there was P1870 being generated and stored with late harsh 1-2 upshifts, then that will fix that problem. If in fact the P1870 was due to this you know, bore and valve wearing out, which most of the time it is. Sometimes it's the rear stator bushing in the pump. So if you have a situation where, you know, P1870's storing and not going away after you replace the valve body or, you know, do whatever repair work, install a fits-all valve or what have you, then more than likely it's going to be either the torque converter itself is going out or it's going to be that rear stator bushing in the pump. So that's why we want to put updated parts in each of these areas to drive down that risk of it happening again. Okay, and of course your PWM solenoid. Okay, I'll address the separator plate once we have the valve body all together, and we'll talk about hole size and, you know, setting up the shift calibration and firmness based on everything else that you have going on in more detail, but we'll continue with the rest of the valve body for now. So this is going to be the what I call the AFL side or the EPC side. So of course you have your electronic pressure control solenoid, and then you have Transgo's little white spring that goes inside the main factory spring for the actuator feed limit valve. Now if you're not doing a shift kit, what you can do is block the 3-2 downshift valve and, you know, using something else, and take the spring out of that valve and stick it inside this valve, and you'll basically duplicate what Transgo is having you do, which is to increase AFL pressure charge or feed to the solenoids, because that's what the AFL valve does. It's really a solenoid regulator valve. So it's responsible for providing all of the solenoid feed pressure to your 3 shift solenoids, you know, shift solenoid A and B and your 3-2 downshift, along with your EPC. So 1-2 accumulator valve. Here's the factory spring. This is out of the 4L65E. And then you have your Transgo spring. And how Transgo has you do this is they have you look at your 1-2 accumulator valve sleeve here for this code. It's a 2-digit code. This one's DX. Okay, sorry if that's out of focus, but what they'll have you do is they'll have you reference that code, and then there's a multitude of springs that come in this kit. I think there's like 3 or 4, maybe 5 different color springs, and they'll have you pick the spring that most aligns with your 1-2 accumulator valve and your servo that you're going to be running, and we'll talk about that in a second. So this is the 2-3 valve train. So this is going to be your 2-3 upshift valve and your 2-3 shuttle valve. And believe it or not, there is some folks that actually block this off inboard as well. I've actually never done that, but the transmission will still shift up and down, from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 2, and you block all these valves. You can think of all of those 3 valves as kind of almost like a pulse width modulated, type setup where it will abate, or I don't want to say slow, but regulate the speed in which these 2 shifts occur, the 2-3 and the 3-2. So for high performance, high stall, you want to remove that regulation and have those shifts happen as quickly as possible to reduce slip, especially under high power. All right, 1-2 shift valve and spring, no alterations are to be made to this valve train. And then for your low overrun valve, you have the factory spring, and then you have the Transgo spring. There's not a whole lot of difference between the 2 of them, but Transgo does provide you a spring for this location in both its SK4L60E as well as its HD2. And then for the forward abuse valve, there's no change. And then of course for your forward accumulator, everything is factory. If you have a plastic forward accumulator piston that comes in with the valve body that you're working on, always replace it with a brand new aluminum one. You never want to reuse plastic accumulator pistons in any application if at all possible. You always want to replace with aluminum or billet aluminum. All right, let's talk a little bit about the servo assemblies. There's 2 servos here. Obviously, we're not going to stick 2 servos in the transmission. The billet servo that you see in the back is the Superior Technologies billet servo kit. It's the entire kit, so it covers 2nd and 4th gear. It provides their own pin, their own main return spring, and it's a whole different animal compared to the factory servo. And I'll talk about how this will influence our decision making when it comes to calibrating our 1-2 feed hole and determining what our band release should be. But suffice to say, this is the most aggressive servo available for the 700R4 4L60E family of transmissions that I'm aware of. The Sonex Super Hold servos are maybe 5% less in terms of their apply surface area, therefore their aggression, if you will. And then you have the Corvette servo, which is what we have here. And then, of course, your 553 servos and your 554 servos, which are, the most mild of the 4L60E 700R4 second gear servos. The 4th gear servo, apply piston, which is in here, the factory one anyway. There's no change or no variance there. That's 1 piston for every single 700R4, 4L60E, 65, 70E to my knowledge. The 4L75E, the Supermatic, which is GM's like super high performance beefed up version of the 4L65 or 4L70E, that also uses a billet servo assembly of some sort. Exactly which one, I don't know. So because none of the parts from the shift kit are going to go onto the billet servo, I'm going to show the buildup of the conventional servo because there's quite a few parts from the shift kit that go in there. And then they also have you grind 4 little V-shaped notches at the 12, 6, 9, and 3 position here on the cover, so that you can further promote better fluid flow between the 2-3 accumulator and the rest of the circuit. This servo that I'm going to build up is not going to go in the 4L65E that we're building for this customer. That's going to go into another transmission. Okay, last thing that I'll go over before we get into the actual work is the accumulators. So Here is the stock or factory 1-2 accumulator setup with the piston and the 2 springs, and then here is the Transgo setup. Transgo gives you 3 of these spacers or shims to stick on the bottom of the 1-2 accumulator housing to further firm up the 1-2 shift. What they're having you do here is shorten the accumulation cycle, and so that there is more fluid being diverted to the servo. Now, when the transmission that had this kit originally installed came in, it had these 2 shims, and then of course the rest of it. It came with a plastic piston, which, you know, again, whoever set that up, I don't know why they reused a plastic piston, but whatever. And it also had the billet servo installed. So the 1-2 shift in that transmission was extraordinarily harsh at part throttle, which is where most people are going to be doing their driving. So we're going to tune it down a little bit and be a little bit more conservative in our feed hole size, given what we're doing here in the accumulator housing, what we're doing with the servo and our choice of servo, and you know, the overall build profile of the vehicle and the rest of the transmission. So all that stuff has to be taken into account, along with like things like gear ratio, final drive, converter stall, to make sure everything is matched and phased together. All right. If you're curious and you want to do this mod yourself, because you don't need the shift kit to do it, this shim is 880 thousandths wide, 115 thou thick, and 320 thousandths for an inner diameter here in the little donut hole. Okay, so you can probably go to a hardware store and find something similar to these, or, you know, maybe you want to make one that's twice as thick, right, like so, or maybe 3 times as thick, because the Transgo does provide you with 3 shims, and you can customize your setup without having to purchase the kit, but, you know, that's up to you. Finally, 4th gear. So this is how 4th gear is set up from the factory. You have your 4th accumulator piston in the bore in the case. You have your blue spring sitting on top, and then of course you have your pin. For Transgo, what we're going to do is we're going to set it up with the yellowish green spring that comes in the kit with the pin, and we're going to put the piston in just like this. And then of course our new seal. Now, if you don't have a shift kit but you want to kind of firm up your 3/4 apply, here's what you can do. Take your old 3/4 accumulator piston, because you're never going to reuse this, you're going to buy a new one. Grind off about 1/3 of these 3 legs here. Okay, then take this and stick it in the bore upside down with no seal. Then take your new piston, put your new seal on, put your pin in the bore, and then mesh the legs just like this and sit it on top of it. Okay, you know, obviously again you have your pin in there. But this will pretty much reduce accumulation in the 3/4 shift by about 90%. Okay, you don't need to restrict the 3/4 orifice, just simply do that, and that will firm up that shift very nicely. And again, you don't need a shift kit. You'll not include any springs, don't put any springs in there, just the 2 pistons, the new one with the seal on top, meshed just like this, 1/3 ground off the legs, and it'll fit just below flush of the case deck. And that'll allow you to put the separator plate on, and, you know, there won't be any interference. Okay, your 1-2 accumulator pin diameter is going to be 0.235. These are the small hole diameter pins. I believe early 4L60Es carried forward the large hole diameter pin in their 1-2 accumulators. So early means 92 through 95, I think. It's been a while since I've done an early one. I'll have to double check that and annotate the video if that's not correct. All right, enough babbling. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to work from the center of the bench out, meaning I'm going to start with the valve body, get that out of the way, then we'll do the pump assembly, then we'll go to the forward drum. You'll see that build up, and then we'll talk a little bit about the separator plate in some detail. You know, we'll work in the servo and 1-2 accumulator assembly, and then I'll close with installing the 4th gear accumulator assembly at the case. Alright, so start wetting down everything with WD-40, and if you want you can use transmission fluid, you know, Dex 3 or 6 or whatever you're going to use. Just make sure you saturate everything thoroughly with this stuff. O-rings, valves, anything else. and then hit the bores up. I always start on the EPC side, you know, or the accumulator side. It makes it easy for when I gotta stand the valve body up so that I can kind of press down on the, you know, plug for the AFL valve and, you know, seat that little retainer clip. And then I will do the, you know, PWM side because it's a lot easier that way. Otherwise, I would have to leave these solenoids out. Okay, so just install your little O-ring on your forward accumulator piston. Go ahead and insert your pin. And then just press down firmly. And ease it into the board. Alright, next what you're going to do is, and like I said, I got my two halves here kind of mismatched. I really should have this half here and then this stuff over here, but poor planning, I guess, on my part. So your next step is to install your forward abuse valve in this location here. And then go ahead and follow it up with your plug. So this is unidirectional. It does not matter which side you stick it in, you know, which end goes in, it's the same. And what I like to do is I'll push on it a little bit like that just to make sure that the abuse valve itself is moving nice and free in the bore. And just line it up and stick it in. And then you're going to follow it up with your low overrun valve. Just like this. Make sure you have the Transgo spring installed and the factory spring on the bench. And then finish off with your spring for the accumulator and then your cover. Okay, 8mm on these bolts, and then I typically torque them to 90 inch-pounds. For now, you can just zip them down with an impact. Okay, I don't know how much of that was in the shot, but that's how you assemble that bore. All right. Manual valve I'll do last because otherwise it's constantly wanting to come out, it gets in the way. So here's your 1-2 shift valve. And then your 2-3 shift valve, it's going to go with the large spool inboard. And then your 2-3 shuttle valve is going to have the wide portion of the valve, the base of the valve facing you, facing out. Okay, no spring tension obviously on the 2-3 shift. Your shift solenoid. So this is going to be shift solenoid A, that's going to be shift solenoid B. Shift solenoid A is on in first and fourth. Shift solenoid B is on in third and fourth. It's off in first and second. Shift solenoid A comes off in second and third. Okay, next is going to be your 1-2 accumulator. So we're going to use the spring from the Transgo kit. And how I like to do these is I will just simply take the whole valve body and then insert the sleeve in vertically, and then once it's in fully, take my roll pin and insert it just like that. Alright, now we'll go ahead and we'll do the actuator feed limit valve. So here's your spring. This is from the factory, and then the Transgo spring on the inside. And then it's going to go just like this. Alright, now I'm going to turn the valve body vertical again so that we can press down on it and install it. And when I say it, I'm referring to the bore plug. Okay, the bore plug may be a tight fit. That's normal. Okay, that's kind of what you want. Actually, you don't want this plug to be loose. Hey, I'm going in the wrong hole. It's going to be right here. Or wrong slot, I should say. So. Okay, next is your EPC, and then the little retainer, an 8mm retaining bolt. I'll bring this a little closer so you can see exactly how it goes. There's flats on the base of the EPC there. You want to put the retainer clips, little hooked end here, this little T-shaped portion of the clip. You want to put that right there, right between the casting and the EPC. Alright, so got one side down, got one more to go. I'm going to switch the camera angle a little bit, and then we'll do the other side. You can never use too much WD-40, you can only use too little. Okay, I'm actually going to do the two solenoids last. Reason being is they're kind of delicate, so I don't want to cause any problems. Okay, so first things first, flip it over upside down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to install the PWM regulator valve. And Transgo gives you a little machine screw that'll thread here into the threaded location here at the outboard end of the valve. And what they want you to do is, once you install this, they want you to kind of push it in and out 10 times just to kind of season it, I guess, or fit it, and then they call it good. So I'll just do that with the punch. I don't know where the little screw is. I have probably a half dozen of them, but who the hell knows where they might be. And that bore's right here, I'm sorry. This is the 3-2 downshift valve bore. This is the PWM bore. Getting mixed up here. Alright, so this is what they want you to do, just this. Do that 10 times, and then you're ready to install your bore plug. Alright, now this is going to be a lot tougher going in than the factory valving, obviously. Now, if you don't have a shift kit or another valve, what you can do is you could take check balls. I'll annotate the video with the diameter. But I want to say they're like something in the neighborhood of an eighth, 125 thousandths, and you can put one in here and one in here, and then between those two check balls and the factory spring will be enough to block this valve from moving. What you want to do is you want to block the inboard valve, and then that will convert that circuit to an on-off circuit. Now, if you have a leaky bore here, okay, if this is not holding vacuum, then that'll convert your deal to an on-off, but it's not going to solve P1870. You'll still probably generate that code. It's less likely because it's no longer, slipping in a PWM fashion, but still you want to use your fits-all valve if P1870 resets. All right. So we're going to do our 3-4 and 4-3. So again, big end in first. And sometimes the 3-4 won't go in all the way right away, so you have to persuade it a little bit, and then go ahead and install your outboard valve. Flip back around. And then when we're done, we're going to check all these valves with a small flat blade screwdriver just to make sure that they're working properly. Okay, here is your 3-4 upshift valve. And when you take these valve bodies apart, both the 3-4 upshift and the 3-2 downshift, you want to make sure that you have your thumb or finger over the bore so that the plug doesn't fly off. Because as soon as you remove this retainer clip, it's going to want to fly off. Another tip, if the plug doesn't want to come out right away, just keep pushing on it like this, and then it'll eventually pop out. And an additional tip that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with what I'm doing here, do not buy these kind of nitrile gloves. They are horrible. As you can see, like the ends kind of, get all loose and they get in the way of your dexterity and they mess it all up. I mean, I'm kind of in excuse-making mode at the moment because I've been fumbling around with this thing, but part of it is these gloves, the other part of it is just me not being as thoughtful as I should have been when setting up the bench. Okay, same deal, reverse abuse valve. Just press it in all the way, hold it, and then seat your roll pin. Alright, now you're going to install your 3-2 downshift. We're going to take the factory spring, set it aside, and then we're going to use a Transgo spring that will block off this valve from any movement, and it'll block it off inboard. So if you don't have one of these springs, and I'll annotate the video. In fact, here, let me pull it out again. I'll annotate the video with the dimension as you see it here, fully compressed, and the outside diameter and the inside diameter, so that you have that. If you want to make either your own spring or some kind of really stiff hose or a slug of some sort, you could do that. When you force this in all the way, you'll feel it come to a positive stop, meaning there's going to be no movement in this bore in terms of that valve stroking. Okay, I'm going to flip it back around, and we'll go install our 3-2 control valve. And you may have to finagle this valve just a little bit to get it to fully seat in the bore. There it goes. And then we'll go ahead and get our 2-3 solenoid, or excuse me, 3-2 solenoid. 3-2 solenoid. This is a 3-2 control solenoid. Now, if you're not familiar with real late model units, the 3-2 control solenoid was eliminated in 2009. They also eliminated the pressure switch manifold assembly that year and the external manual lever position sensor. So if you're working on a 09 and up unit, you will not have a pressure switch manifold assembly at this location here on the valve body, and you will not have a 3-2 solenoid here, nor will you have an MLPS, or manual lever position sensor, otherwise known as a transmission digital range sensor, on the selector shaft on the outside of the transmission on the driver's side. All of that was replaced with what's called an internal mode switch, and the mode switch does the job of both the pressure switch manifold assembly as well as the external manual lever position sensor. Alright, last thing we'll do is install our PWM valve, or excuse me, PWM solenoid. And valve body is fully assembled. So we have all of the HD2 shift kits, components, parts, etc. placed into the valve body. So the very last thing we're going to do with it is install the check balls so that we can get it ready for installation back onto the case when the time comes. So let me go get some check balls and then we'll do that. Alright, so here are the check ball locations. Got a check ball here, one here, and then one right alongside of it in the other part of the bathtub here. And you have check balls here, here, and here, and then one here for a total of 7 check balls in this valve body. Just take some green assembly lube and just stick it all up in the location for each check ball, smother them so that when you go to install this thing upside, right side up on the case or upside down, I guess depending on how you're looking at it, the check balls won't fall out. Main thing is sometimes actually mating it to the case in the right location can, you might have to jostle it a little bit. And if the check balls fall out, either 1, 2, or whatever, you do run the risk of one of them falling inside the case, and then you got to take the whole transmission apart to find it. So now, when you go to start this thing up and drive it, the shifting may be a little bumpy at first because this stuff is designed to melt and dissolve in transmission fluid, but if you're using as much as I am, it's not going to all dissolve right away. So, like I said, I mean, I have no problem with it being a little bumpy for a few seconds, because that's it. I mean, after that it'll smooth out and shift normally, if it means I don't have to be digging through the case for a check ball that fell in there. All right. All right, that's the valve body. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the plate and what we're doing here. So because we're using a billet servo, the Superior Tech Super Servo, the most aggressive, most powerful on the market, what we're going to need to do is kind of moderate a little bit the hole size for the 1.2. I'm going to start with 0.86 or 0.086, I should say. I think that that should provide a nice firm shift, especially at higher or wide open throttle positions. But when when he's driving around just in normal traffic, part throttle, regular everyday driving, it should shift crisply. It probably won't resemble a purely stock transmission, but it won't be jarring or backbreaking or unpleasant either. At least it shouldn't be. 3/4 upshift going to be 0.93, band release 0.93. I'm going to go 100 thousandths on the 2/3 shift, and then I'm going to leave the AFL and TCC holes here respectively alone. I went 0.86 on the low reverse, so if he does do some manual shifting, again, it'll firm up that shift. And then there's a couple of check ball locations here that I have to repair, and with the little repair sleeves. I have a separate video on that if you're interested in seeing that. You can watch that video, but the kits themselves that contain the sleeves and the little retainers or snap rings or whatever you want to call them, they'll service, I want to say, an entire separator plate, or if usually it's just the 1-2 shift location and then the number 1 check ball. That'll do like either 6, 7, or 8 plates. I can't remember exactly which, but either way, it's a lot more cost effective, as long as there's nothing else wrong with your factory plate, than to purchase a replacement separator plate. Okay, let's check all our valves, make sure everything's moving freely. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with the 3/4 upshift valve. We would normally test the 3/2 downshift, but since I typically block that off, and in this case we use Transgo's kit to block it, that's not going to move no matter what. So I just check it, make sure it's moving. Then here's our 3/4 relay and 4/3 sequence. So you just want to make sure everything is moving nice and easy. Should not be difficult to get the valves to stroke, and they should return under their own power once you relieve spring tension. So we already more or less tested this TCC regulator valve, but we'll test it again. Moves just fine. Next is going to be the actuator feed limit valve. So let's see if I can hold this up so you can get a glimpse of what I'm doing. Okay, that moves nice and freely. Returns under spring tension. There's a lot of spring tension. Obviously, we have a dual spring setup. And then we'll flip it around. So we got the overrun valve. Now the overrun valve is going to stroke in this direction. Let's see if I can get in behind it. Okay. All right, then our 1-2 shift valve. This is actually a little harder to test, so gotta find a spool that's accessible and then stroke it. So that's good. He said stroke it. So 1-2 accumulator valve. Moves just fine. Okay, manual valve, I suppose if you wanted you can test that. Okay, that obviously moves as it should. So this valve body's done. All right, now we're ready to tackle the pump. So a couple things first. For anything high performance, you always want to drill out your drain back here to 5/16, and do it when the old bushing is installed. Then install your new bushing. And we'll have to put a seal in here before we start building this up, but you just want to make sure it's seated just like this, okay? And that'll set you up for high RPM, high performance without worrying about the front seal blowing out. 4L60E 700R4s didn't really have that problem, at least not with factory or mild performance builds. The 4L80Es manufactured in the early 90s, that was kind of an issue with them, even in stock form. But some changes made to that transmission over time reduced the likelihood, but I still drill the drain back on those to 1/4 of an inch or 5/16 for real high RPM, high performance situations. It's just good practice. Like I said, we're going to install the unbreakable pump ring kit and then the stuff from the shift kit. So let me put the seal in and then we'll build up the pump assembly. All right, I think we're situated, get everything we need. So front seal installed. So now we can go ahead and build everything up. So just lube up the pocket real thoroughly, like any other, any other pump. A lot of what you're going to see here is more or less the same, same in terms of process that you've already seen from my other 4L60E or 700R4 build-up videos. So, I mean, if you want to skip this section, that's fine. I'll have it partitioned out. But, if you want to keep watching, that's also fine too. Alright, so, if you haven't seen this done before, either by me or anyone else, when you install the slide with the support O-ring and cover, I like to just go like this with it. And that way the cover's not going to fall off and the O-ring's not going to fall out. And then the next thing you do is take your little Teflon seals, or not seals, these are like pivot springs or something. I'm not even sure what the hell they're called. You can make up your own name for them, but install them first. And the rectangular shaped Teflon thingy goes, on the outside, and then the little rollerized one, the tubular one, goes on the inside. I gotta tell you, I'm really fumbling with my words on this video. I don't know why. Just I got the equivalent of 2 right hands and 2 left feet when it comes to oration today. All right, your pivot pin and spring is going to go in next. Okay, just like that. And then let me clear some of this stuff out of the way. We can kind of get front and center. Okay, once you have that in there, then you can go ahead and install your slide spring. And for that you want kind of a nice big flat screwdriver, slotted screwdriver. Just come up like this with it. Press it down while levering rearward, and that'll allow you to slide that spring into place. Okay, just double check, make sure everything is as seated as you can get it. Yeah, there we go again with the stuttering. Is as seated as you can get it. Okay, this is going to stick up a little bit, these two things. It's no big deal. When we go to put the cover on, when we made everything together, it'll squash it down. Alright, now our pump rings. And then we want to install our new rotor guide. I don't ever reuse these guides. I know a lot of builders do, and it's not the end of the world. Most of them, are in good shape. I mean, it's kind of like they're in better shape than they look in many cases, but at the same token, the guides are like $1 or $1.50. So to me, it never made sense, to put the old one back in. And when it comes to this kind of stuff, I prefer to put new each and every time. So again, same deal with these vanes. Some builders will reuse the vanes, and you know, I don't typically do that. I want to say a packet of vanes is like $3 or $4. So the rotor and the slides themselves are in good shape. All you're really doing is spending money on new vanes and a new rotor guide, and then of course if you want to do the Transgo unbreakable rings, then you're spending, I don't know, 10 or 15 bucks on that. And then the Sonics bushing is like another $8 or $9, something like that. And then if you want to go with the, you know, the rear stator bushing Sonics makes, you can buy that individually too, and I want to say it's around the same price as those other things. And then just seat your top ring. And I'll get in there eventually. Alright, so the pump body is all done. So we'll sit it back there. And a little support. I think that's a Sun Gear shell out of like a 4T65E, I think. Alright, so for the pump cover stator, we installed a new pickup seal here. And then we had a machine, so it's perfectly flush and flat. New front stator bushing, and then here is the rear stator bushing from Sonics. So like I said, if you have a problem with P1870 and it won't go away, you've replaced, you know, the valve and the valve body with the Fitz-all valve for the TCC regulator, and maybe you replaced the whole valve body, or you're going through valve bodies and nothing seems to be fixing it, and you even replaced the torque converter, you know, that bushing could be the source of your problem. I don't know why I sprayed that down. So okay, we'll cover this real quick once again. Transgo gives you a little a sleeve or a spacer that's going to go right here on the stem, and then your boost valve goes like that in the sleeve. So I'm going to give it some thick assembly lube so that it stays put. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and reuse the Transgo snap ring. Alright, a little bit of the lube on the pump cover seal and filter, or O-ring, whatever you want to call it. And then, as usual, spray down your bores with WD. I'll tell you, if I do post this video and you're watching it, it got like this close to not making it off the cutting room floor, because of all the friggin' editing that I'm gonna have to do to make it so that I sound even halfway lucid and, you know, like I kind of sort of know what the hell I'm doing. Okay, so pressure regulator valve and then your two springs. And then get your snap ring pliers and snap ring handy. And then go ahead and install your boost. You may have to wiggle it just a little bit like that to get it to go. And I'll come with the pliers and the snap ring here with the eye loop facing to the 9 o'clock position. And then I'll just come in, engage it, and push on it. If your hands are real slippery like mine, or if you're wearing gloves that suck like I am, This might be a little bit harder than if you wore, you know, better gloves. And the funny thing is, like, I feel perfectly fine health-wise. Like, I'm not sick, I'm not, you know, feeling dizzy or, you know, anything like that. I don't have any health problems. But you'd never know it if you only watch this video. I think I was half past dead or something. Alright, so your 2 springs for your torque converter clutch control valve, and then your stem side in. Okay, just let it fall down kind of on its own, don't force anything. And then same deal with the snap ring. Okay, you always want to check these two, make sure that nothing's going to pop out on you. So just push the boost valve in multiple times. Same with this one. And we'll use snap ring pliers. Okay, I try to push on the valve stop itself, not the valve. Everything seems to be good. One time I was doing this, I wasn't filming anything, it's a wonder, and the boost valve like flew out. I only had it in about part way, and it looked like it was in all the way. Almost hit me in the face. So, all right, we'll put these Teflon sealing rings on last. Move all the stock parts aside, get them out of the way. These bolts get 15 foot-pounds. Hey, I get questions periodically about this this alignment tool. I purchased it off eBay. God, it has to be at this point 8 or 9 years, 10 years, somewhere in there. It's one of the first specialized tools I purchased when I started doing transmissions about 10 years ago. And for the life of me, I have absolutely no idea specifically who or where, or, you know, I'm almost positive it was eBay. You know, that's what I was purchasing the bulk of my specialty tools at the time, and, you know, to this day, that's where I get the majority of them. So lube up both halves, and then I try to get these two bolts right here that are kind of the closest together, and then match them up with these two on the pump cover. I just try to keep this as level as you can while you're tightening it up and cinching it down. And then I try to center each half to where there's a roughly equal amount of space in the bolt hole locations around each bolt. And that tells me that it's, you know, as centered as I could possibly get it. Alright, one of the things I like to do before I torque everything up is just sit it in the case and make sure that it'll install without any problems, without getting hung up anywhere. So let's take the band off. Just do a once over all the way around. Make sure it's, all aligned, that there's not, anything obvious sticking out, like either here or here. One side is overhanging or underhanging the other. And then I'm going to go test fit it in the case. Hey, sits in there, no problem. Of course, it is a problem coming back out sometimes. Hey, 15 foot-pounds. When you have something around like this and there's an odd number of fasteners, in this case we have 5, just start wherever and then skip every other one until you get to all of them. So I'll start here. And just work your way around. No different than a 5-lug wheel, torquing up your lug nuts or your lug bolts. And eventually you'll get to one that's already tight, and then you just go around once more to make sure that you got to all of them. Okay. Okay, grab yourself a checking tool. If you don't have a checking tool, just use your converter. I mean, even if you only have your old one, you haven't exchanged it yet for the new one, and that's fine too. I mean, it get a little dirty, but it's not going to hurt anything. I got the wrong checking tool. See? Oh, I'm batting 1,000 today. Batting 1,000. That was for a 46, 47, 48 RE Dodge. Okay, so if you're installing the converter onto the pump, you'll hear usually 2 distinct clunks, just like that. And then just simply rotate the tool, make sure that the rotor itself's rotating. Every once in a great while, you'll set this thing up perfectly. You'll do everything right. And when you go to check the pump, check rotation of that rotor, it won't move. It'll be locked up. And you've checked your clearance is good, but what the problem is the vanes themselves. Every once in a blue moon, you'll get either one or more pump vanes that are simply too tall. And so when you go to mate the 2 halves together, you'll have a bind up. So that's happened to me once. And the last time that happened was, I want to say about 5 years ago in a 4L60E. So not something that you lay up at night worrying about, but if you ever have that problem, chances are it's those vanes. So either replace the whole packet or just find the fender or fenders and swap them out with the old vanes. I mean, again, 1 or 2 old vanes and a bunch of new ones, it's not going to hurt a damn thing. Alright, let's go ahead and deal with the high rate return springs. So in the kit, in addition to instructions, you'll have a little press plate. This is going to be for your bleeder valve. This is going to take the place of the stock 3/4 bleeder ball capsule. And then these little yellow springs will be for your 3/4. They also have plain springs. In the instructions, it'll give you some guidance on which ones to use. Okay, so here are the instructions. we're going to assume, and I always do, that we're going to be revving over 5,500 RPMs, so we're going to use the yellow springs. And what we need to do is take the little tang and the hooks and bend them back once we get all the factory springs out, so that they don't interfere with this thing being able to go back together with the yellow springs. And then for the forward drum, and then for the forward return spring, we're going to go ahead and use these. Now here's my advice. Leave these springs in this bag, you know, sealed up, and stick it somewhere else far away while you remove these springs. And then take these springs and, you know, put them on another bench or something, so that you don't get confused as to which springs are which, because they look identical. And that actually happened to me once, you know, only on a couple of them, to where I was able to figure it out. But still, it's, if you mix them all up, then it's going to be a real problem. Okay, just take your screwdriver. Sometimes you can pry them apart just like by hand, like I just tried to do, but sometimes you can't. So just go around and, you know, pry the springs off of the spring seats. And, you know, once you get a few started, you should be able to get all the rest of them. And if you bend this, don't worry about it. All you're going to do is flatten it back out anyway. So and don't worry about breaking any of these springs. It's not like you're going to reuse them. It's like a couple over here that are real stubborn, and that's what's holding it up. It's much drier today than it's been lately, so it's like my voice is going in and out. It sounds kind of hoarse or scratchy. That's a big part of the reason why. Okay, so you're going to take this to a flat surface and just, you know, kind of press on it a little bit. I'm going to clean it up too. And then for this side, just take a pair of diags and twist right off. So very simple, very easy. Doesn't take long at all with the 4L60s or 700R4s. Now, if you're installing the high rate return springs for the 4L80, that's a different story. And I think I mentioned this a few times in the course of doing, you know, these high rate return spring installs. The 4L80 is a pain. I mean, you're going to be there with that thing for a while. For the direct clutch, and for the intermediate clutch, it's, you know, pretty simple deal. But for the direct, it's a pain. Okay, so this is all sludge and grime. I'm going to clean this off. So let me go ahead and take care of this stuff here, and then we'll come back. I'll bring the high rate return springs and we'll resume. Basically, the object there will be to just clip the new springs into each of these little spring seats. That's basically it. Alright, all cleaned up. Let me get rid of these springs. I mean, you can save yours, you can throw them out. I usually throw them out. I have a whole bunch of spring sets that are factory, so if occasionally I get one in and a spring is bent or even broken, which is almost never, I have plenty of spares. I mean, you can just buy a new return spring assembly for, you know, not much money. Alright, so all you're going to do is just simply go in with it. One side is slightly wider than the other. It's not obvious by eye, so you saw me there. I tried to install the wider side, but that didn't work, so I just flipped it around and then it worked. Sometimes they won't go in, so if you get one like that, just save it for last or something. You want to install all of the springs from each of these packages. You don't want to do mix and match. I mean, I think Transgo suggests that you do that, but if you're going to do that, you know, be sure of your application, because there's basically no point to using these if you think you only need half of them. So I'm an all or nothing kind of builder when it comes to high rate return springs, unless there's something very, very specific that's going on where, you know, I'm trying to achieve a certain shift calibration that is like literally just simply not possible by doing all or nothing. I knew that one wasn't seated. Okay, that one's going to probably be saved for last. Sometimes the spring is a little bit smaller in diameter than it should be. So just keep trying different spring seats until you find one that'll work. I mean, this is by far the most unpleasant part of the whole build, is dealing with seating these individual springs in their respective spring seat locations. And like I said, as bad as the 60 is, or, you know, as tedious as it appears, the 80 is much, much worse. In the 480E build-up that I have out there on the channel, I want to say it took like however long the footage of me installing, you know, these high rate return springs and direct clutch, you know, for the direct return spring assembly. I want to say that the actual time that I spent was like 4 or 5 times longer. All right, home stretch, final 2, and 1 more. Let's see if we can get it to go without incident. Or is it gonna fight us? Oh, made it. All right, now just put the other end on, and it's done. So when you go to press it down on the foot press, you're gonna put this little press plate over top of it, because that will prevent it from bending this top plate down, because otherwise, given how stiff these springs are, this will bend and distort, and you don't want that. All right, 3, 4. So just press down, and then pry the pry the loop outward like that. So, and then if the hook is kind of, you know, in front of the loop, just bend it back. And then once you got 2 loose, the rest are easy. Yeah, the other 2 will just come off. And then these little springs, you know, it's very easy to get them off, and they like to fly all over the place, so you might have to chase a couple of them down. Okay, same kind of deal. First things first, you want to make sure that there's not going to be any interference with respect to the hook or the loop. So you can deal with this however you want. Some folks will just simply, you know, cut the hooks off, cut the loops off. You can bend them back. I think Transgo tells you to bend the hooks inward so that they don't interfere with anything. Incidentally, if you have a first type retainer, in other words an early 3/4 return spring assembly where there's no hooks or anything like that, they tell you to use the white springs. So an example would be this right here. Okay, you're going to find these in your 700R4s and early 4L60Es. Okay, same deal here. Get this to focus. Okay, you can see that the right side is noticeably smaller in diameter than this side, the left side. You know, top side, bottom side. So the small diameter, you just want to put there on the engage it there as best you can on the spring seat. And let me collapse these before I go any further. You know what? It's not going to matter. Okay, forward piston housing. Your forward piston. Okay, never reuse your bonded pistons. Always replace them. Alright, it's finally in there. Jesus. Okay, let's put the 3/4 turn spring assembly and then our setup for the forward. So for our drum, we're going to have to replace the O-ring down there and base the stator. So let me reposition the camera and then we'll resume. I still got the old O-ring in here, so I'm going to take that out. And lather everything up down below. Now if you forget to put that green O-ring back in, you'll have third gear starts. That's the only thing that partitions the forward apply circuit and the 3/4 apply circuit. A little Viton seal. Whatever you do, never ever use plastic seals here. They don't come in the 4L60E kits, they come in the 700R4 kits. So if you're rebuilding a 700R4, take that plastic seal and throw it in the trash immediately. And then purchase a 4L60E Viton seal. 3/4 ply piston. Alright, with the 3/4 piston installed, the O-ring and the Viton seal, now we're going to go ahead and install the rest of the piston assemblies. But before we do, just want to bring this back real quick, show you I realigned the hooks and the loops from the top and the bottom retainers, and then flattened the hooks and the loops out to the extent that I could, just so that they don't interfere with the spring operation in any way, shape, or form. So just set that in there. You know, be real careful with it, otherwise the springs will pop out. And then go ahead and set in your forward piston housing. And then if you have a little lip seal protector tool, you can throw that in the drum. And then just make sure that your tabs here on the forward piston, the wide tabs, are aligned with the lugs on the 3/4 ply ring. Lugs, legs. You know what kind of day I'm having already, so anyway, just carefully set it in and then kind of follow it down and press it in. Alright, next is your coast clutch piston. Alright, now if you're going to run Sonic's forward drum reinforcement kit for this transmission, or the 700R4, you're not going to install the factory coast clutch piston. You're going to install the one that Sonic's provides in the kit. That is a billet piston, so billet aluminum, and it's designed specifically you know, to go with that reinforcement sleeve that they have you install here on, you know, the very top side of the stator. And when I say stator, I'm talking about obviously the forward drum, not the pump. Alright, now you're going to position your forward clutch return spring assembly like so, and your press plate. So let me go to the foot press, I'll install the snap ring, and then we'll go ahead and build up the rest of the drum. Check clearances and then air check it. Okay, now we're ready to finish off the drums. So first things first, we're going to do our coast clutch. So steel friction, apply plate. Again, I do not soak any of my frictions. For those that are new to my channel, or this is the first video of mine you're watching, I have a separate video that kind of goes into the rationalization as to why that is. You can check that out, but I never soak my friction discs. Okay, time for our sprag. Always just double check rotation for the final time. It needs to be clockwise, freewheeling, and then locks counterclockwise. And then here you see the little lube slits that I cut into the sun gear that will promote better flow of lubricant, or more lubricant to, I should say lubricant, lube oil, lubricant. That'll promote better fluid flow over the planetaries and the captured bearing inside the planetaries for the front and the rear planets. Okay, forward clutch. So your two tabs right here, they're going to go in this wide cutout. So 5 frictions, 5 steels, and you want your clearance to be in the neighborhood of 40 thousandths. Okay, so if you see the very top of the pressure plate align with the lug there, then that should get you right where you need to be. We'll check to be sure, because if we're a little tight on clearance, then we're going to have to make some adjustments, you know, figure it out, and you know, ultimately get ourselves within clearance. Generally speaking, if you can do this, you know, spin the sun gear like that, you know, the whole sprag assembly, then you should be fine. Okay, see how there's plenty of movement underneath here, under the snap ring. Okay, you can just go like this, the sun gear, and that will push the snap ring to the underside of the top lug here, and I can tell we have the clearance we need. So the 3/4 pack may be a different matter. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're going to use lindered steels. So 7 frictions, 6 steels, 4L65E spec. You can run a max pack, or you can run, you know, like a an aftermarket 3/4 kit. My thing with those is a lot of times, you know, to obviously get the amount of frictions that they have you put into this clutch, you know, they got to make some trade-offs, and it's usually much thinner steel, and it's usually much thinner steels than I'm comfortable with. The Z-Pack is a perfect example of that. If you watched, you know, High Performance 4L60E Part 7, you saw that they were absolutely charbroiled. Now, there's other factors that contributed to that, you know, namely the drum being completely compromised and, you know, leaking profusely at the input shaft drum junction. But, you know, just yeah, a little bit of adversity, and it's like, I'm afraid that stuff like that's going to just cone, and you know, you won't have a lot of resiliency. They're not very survivable. So okay, this should be okay. I'll have to check clearance later. It looks like it's about 50 to 60 thousandths. We're going to keep the load release springs out. One other thing I want to touch on, and I'm sorry I skipped right over it when we were putting the drum together. Off camera, I decided to not install the Transgo bleeder orifice valve in place of the factory valve for the 3/4. Reason being is that this truck is going to be mostly a cruiser. I mean, he may have some fun with it occasionally, but it's not going to be like an all-out race or even a street strip vehicle. It's going to mostly be taken to shows, you know, Cars and Coffee and stuff like that. Otherwise, it's going to be a daily driver that he might occasionally, you know, make a run or two on the street. And when I say that, I mean, like, you know, just spirited driving, you know, nothing like actual racing, you know, either from a dig or, you know, roll racing or anything like that. At least so he tells me. You want to leave the load release springs out as well when you're, you know, when you're in that kind of application. So the reason being is that you don't want too much, you know, too much in the way of barriers, so to speak, between the clutch pack being at rest like this and then the clutch pack fully applying. You know, you want to make it easy for the clutch pack, not hard. So it all depends on exactly what you're doing and how you're setting up the pack, and, you know, what the intended use case is going to be. That's going to determine, you know, some of these more granular decisions you're going to make. All right, I'm not going to film the installation of the ceiling rings. I mean, you've seen all that before. But this is the forward drum, so I'll do the sealing rings later. Let's move to the servos. So I'm going to start with the factory servo. This is a Corvette servo, at least for the second gear. An overwhelming majority of you that are working with the HD2 kit are going to be using a factory servo, whether it's an 093 or 553. You should never be using a 554, at least any kind of performance application. But yeah, we'll put this together. This particular assembly is not going to be going into the transmission that we're going to be building. We're actually going to be installing the billet servo, as I mentioned earlier, so we'll do that next. Assembling the servo is fairly easy, fairly straightforward. What I'll do is I'll start with the second gear servo. This is a brand new Corvette servo that we're going to be installing. And you want to take your factory spring that goes here. This cavity is technically the 2-3 accumulator. So that's your 2-3 accumulator spring. And then you're going to install the 2 springs that Transgo gives you in the kit that go into the interior of the factory spring. Just like this, okay? And then next thing we're going to do is take our cover plate. This is our cover plate. As you see, I've ground little, notches in it. So just put a little bit of an assembly lube here and install the wire spring that Transgo provides. So stick that in there, just like that. And then take your pin and insert it like so, turn it upside down. Got your 4th gear piston return spring, your washer, and then your retainer clip. So just press down on it. And again, if you have crappy gloves like I do, you got to be real careful about not getting that glove snagged. Okay, just install your clip, make sure it fully seats, and then what we'll do is I'll go to the press this on, and come back and we'll finish it up. Alright, next I'm going to take our inner scarf cut sealing ring. I'm going to pre-wind it. And then install it right here, just like that. Little green assembly lube to just kind of hold it in place. And then you're going to take your sleeve, a little bit of assembly lube on the inner diameter there on the sealing surface, and then just carefully insert it right over top. Okay, at this point, you can put your O-ring on, or you can put the O-ring on before you do that, doesn't matter. And then for your 4th gear, you're going to do the same thing. Pre-wind it. Oops. Pre-wind. Okay, anytime you have scarf cut sealing rings like that, if you can, if they're big enough to pre-wind them, you always want to pre-wind. Okay, you want to reduce the likelihood that the the sealing ring is going to get snagged on some part of the bore on the way in, and this is especially true of the forward larger scarf cut sealing ring here on the second gear servo. This you're going to pre-wind this super tight. Okay, get it as tight as you can. I mean, this is not nearly as tight as I can take it, and then see how it's nice and kind of curled up like that. That'll allow it to hug that inner groove nice and tight. So then you're going to lather all of that up with assembly lube before you put it in. I mean, I got several videos out there on servo assembly and installation, so I mean, it's not anything you haven't seen before. This golden ring is for setting band clearance. So again, if you are not sure how to set band clearance or what that should look like, what really ideal band clearance looks like, I have a video just solely on showing you what that actually looks like, and you know, how the band kind of hugs the drum without actually touching it. You know, that was published, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. And then I have plenty of reassembly video series that cover the servo installation in detail, where you can reference those if you're not sure. And then the last thing you're going to do is install your main return spring. I'm just going to put it like that for now. So with respect to the indexing grooves here on the end of the pin, there's, I want to say, 4 different lengths of 4L60E 700R4 band apply pins, and they're all different lengths, and how you can tell what length you're working with is the number of grooves here, you know, on the end. So 2 is the most common. That's what I see all the time. If you have a pin that has no grooves in it whatsoever, that's going to be the longest pin available, at least from the factory. And then, you know, 1 is a little bit shorter, 2 grooves, and 3, and so forth. Now, if you're working with a billet servo, and your servo kit comes with the apply pin, then in most of these aftermarket servo deals, the pin is going to be oversized. In other words, when you install it as is, you're going to have an interference fit. And they do that so that you can grind off the tip to the extent you need to achieve that ideal band clearance without using any kind of spacers. Okay, so here's the completed factory servo. I'm going to use that in another build, and then now we're going to build up the Superior servo. So again, as I mentioned, and if you watch my videos now, you see that I kind of reiterate things, a little bit redundant perhaps, but I just want to make sure that, you know, key information is relayed. So the Superior Super Hold servo kit is the most aggressive servo on the market, bar none. I want to say it's about 5 to maybe 10% more aggressive than the Sonic servos, and here we're talking both second and fourth applied servos. You know, I mean, one might be maybe 8%, one might be 12%, I'm not really sure, but that's broadly speaking what the differential is. And over a factory 093 servo, as far as second gear is concerned, this is your second gear billet servo, and it has, I want to say, about 25% more applied surface area. I'll double check that, and if it's wrong I'll annotate, but it is significantly more aggressive than your factory 093. So anyway, without further ado, we'll go ahead and we'll set this up. So you're going to have a spring seat here. This is for your main spring. Okay, it's going to go on this side of the clip, and because this came out of a transmission that was kind of working, you can see the wear marks, so you know kind of exactly which side went where. For the fourth gear apply piston, they use a lip seal, and the lip seal faces in the direction of the cover, you know, so you know, toward this side. Superior does sell a fourth gear sealing kit separately from the rest of the servo assembly. So this is the old lip seal that, you know, came in there with the transmission, and we're obviously not going to reuse that. We want to put a new one on so that we can kind of start over again with a brand new sealing surface. So no different than any other lip seal, just work it into the groove like so. And just like that. And then you're going to need to use some assembly lube and maybe even a lip seal tool to get it into the cover. It's not like the scarf cut sealing rings on the factory stuff. This one takes a little bit more effort to get in there. Okay, so again, your lip here is pointing in the direction of the, again, we're going to be at a loss for words, of the stem or the pilot, whatever the heck you want to call it. Okay, the factory 4th gear apply servo and cover has, you know, the same basic design, it's just not as pronounced. Just work it all the way around until it falls into place and you're done. Okay, so on the 2nd gear servo, and I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of glare here, so I'll try to hold it in a way that there isn't so much glare, but you have 2 thick washers that are going either side of the 2nd gear servo. Okay, one here and one here. So you just go like so. It's one washer. And there's the other washer. Okay, at this point you can start pairing or, you know, sliding your pistons on. So you have the servo piston here, and then you're going to have your cover here. So the side with the notches and the inset is going to face you when you're sticking it on the pin like this. Okay, just like that. And if you want, you can go ahead and put your O-ring. And then you have your return spring and your spacer slash washer. Okay, same deal. Okay, that's not quite on there. There we go. So it sits in there just like that. And next, we'll go ahead and install our O-ring for 4th gear. And we'll put that on. Okay, I'm going to leave the scarf cut ring off of the front of 2nd gear just because I don't want to mess with it right now. I mean, I'll put it on just before I install it, and then you have your main return spring and of course your snap ring. So that's servos. So pretty straightforward deal. Now we're ready to move on to the accumulators. Okay, so I'm going to set the 1.2 accumulator up exactly how it was when I pulled it out of that other transmission. What the previous either builder or installer of this kit did is he used 2 of these washers or spacers, shims, whatever you want to call them. Transgo gives you 3 of these in each kit. So the more shims or spacers you use, the firmer the 1.2 shifter is going to be, because the less accumulation in the 1.2 accumulation circuit you're going to have. So more fluid is going to apply that 2nd gear servo faster. So these are one of the things you want to take into account when setting your feed hole for the 1.2. So in this case we're using a billet servo, the largest, most aggressive out there on the market. And we're going to shim this so that it's going to be fairly aggressive in terms of profile here in the 1.2 accumulator. So that's why I only drilled that 1.2 feed hole 86 thousandths, and who knows, even that might be too firm, but we won't know until we get the transmission in and get a test drive under our belts. The stall that's being used in terms of torque converter is going to be 3200. And if this was a factory stall, I mean, I don't know that I would even use a billet servo, but if I did, I wouldn't drill the hole at all, and I would use the factory, accumulation. All right, so a little bit more, pointers there when it comes to setting up your 1.2. So just lube up the bore there, and then we'll put our sealing ring on, or your O-ring. Alright, so here's the dimensions of one of these washers. I'm going to put that on the bottom, just like that. And we'll put the next washer in. And Let me show you. There's kind of a flat side, and then there's a little more of a rounded side. There's a bevel here. I like to keep the more rounded, smoother side up and the flat side facing down. I don't think it matters, but yeah, it's just personal preference. Okay, next is your spring seat. And then Transgo has you install the blue spring. Okay, just like that. And then got to lube up the O-ring here. Okay, we have a new aluminum 1-2 accumulator piston. And I'll stress and keep stressing it, never ever reuse your plastic pistons. Don't want this thing cracking on you. If you do, you'll burn that band up really quick. Or you'll just go neutral in second. Because more or less everything washes through the accumulator circuit. So you see how stiff that is? In fact, I might be tempted to yank this out. Yeah, let me turn my air on. And you're supposed to use a late style piston with this, but this will technically work fine, but I think I'm going to take out one of those shims. So just put air here to get the piston out. So I'll show you something here real quick. This is from Transgo's instructions for accumulators. This is from their SK4L60E page. So ignore the spring configurations themselves. You have a second type and a third type accumulator piston. Here it tells you the second type piston will actually work in whatever housing, whether you have, you know, a third type housing like this or a second type. You just don't want to take a third type piston, which is this. This is what the late model piston is. It's a third design, and you don't want to stick it in a second type housing with their springs because they can break. Now I'll tell you, Transgo springs have a tendency to break irrespective of whatever housing you're using, so just keep that in mind. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put one washer in and see how it is, and then we'll go ahead and we'll put our spring seat, oops, and our spring, and then we'll go ahead and we'll install the piston. Okay, I want to make sure that this is flush, just like that. I don't generally like I don't like it protruding. That's just my personal take. So I'll just keep this one around. So we're gonna roll with this. I think this will be fine. I mean, if he really needs it firmed up, I can just drill the spacer plate. Okay, that is the 1-2 accumulator. So we'll go over to the case and we'll install the 3-4 accumulator, and then we'll be done. Okay, we've made it. We're at the end. So the last thing that we need to do as far as the Transgo HD2 kit is install the 4th accumulator with the Transgo springs. So we have the Transgo yellow spring, piston pin, and of course the new 4th gear accumulator piston with the new seal installed. So first thing we need to do is get the pin out of its hiding place. Then we need to lube the bore up so that we can get it ready for the piston. Okay, and I know this thing looks absolutely just wrecked, but believe it or not, this is how they all are. You know, it's just a regular paintbrush, and as soon as you start using it with assembly lube, then you know it's gonna look like that. You know, literally from day one. So I think I've had this particular brush for like the last 4 years, believe it or not. Okay, next go ahead and install your spring. Trying to get it as centered in the bore as you can. And then you're going to just sit your piston right on top. Make sure that it's aligned with the pin. And then press it in. Okay, sometimes it'll stay in the bore, but sometimes it won't. Okay. So sometimes it'll stay in, but this one might pop out. If I let it, you know, sit there long enough and keep the camera rolling long enough, you might see it. But that is the Transgo HD2 shift kit. And just to kind of quickly summarize, we installed parts into the valve body. We addressed the separator plate. We installed parts into the forward drum and the pump assembly, the 1-2 accumulator, and the 3-4 accumulator. I covered some of the alternative methods or mods that you can do to kind of achieve the same thing that the kit does with the parts that come with it, so that if you wanted to build your own shift kit that is broadly similar, or to more or less achieve the same results, then you can do that as well with the information from this video. All right. There we go, almost right on cue. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video to the end, extra special thanks. I really appreciate it. I know it's been kind of a long one, so wanted to make sure I covered everything. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day or evening.